All right, Dean Divers, get those tasting glasses ready today. We're going deep into the world of Glenmorangie Signet. This isn't just any single malt, though.
Oh, absolutely not.
This one, I gotta say, it's giving mystery in a bottle vibes before you even crack the seal.
You mean besides what's inside?
Exactly. It's that heavy bottle, the deep, almost black color of the whiskey, and then there's that emblem.
Yeah, you can't miss that emblem.
It's like Glenmorangie knew this wasn't your average Tuesday night dram.
It's definitely sending a message. And you're right to focus on that emblem. It's not just decoration. It's a direct link to ancient Celtic standing stones. Glenmorangie actually adopted that symbol, those stones, as their own coat of arms back in 2004.
Okay, now that's what I call making a statement. But what are they trying to say by putting these ancient stones on a bottle of whiskey?
I think it's about heritage. Glenmorangie's been around since 1843. They've seen a lot of history. That Celtic emblem on the Signet bottle, it's their way of saying, yeah, we're rooted in centuries of Scottish tradition. But it's also a bit more than just a history lesson.
Okay, now you got me intrigued. What else is going on here?
Well, think about those ancient stones. They're shrouded in mystery, right?
Mhm.
Legends and whispers and all that. Glenmorangie's playing with that imagery. They're saying, this whiskey, it has depth, it has secrets waiting to be unlocked. It's not giving you everything all at once.
I like that. Whiskey with secrets. So how do we unlock those secrets? What's the actual liquid inside this serious-looking bottle telling us?
Well, if the bottle's whispering ancient mysteries, the liquid inside, that's practically shouting sophisticated indulgence. Think dark fruits, rich spices.
Okay, that's pretty standard for a scotch though, right? Where's the mystery in that?
Hold on. It's the unexpected notes that make Signet really stand out. I'm talking hints of dark chocolate, a bit of creamy toffee.
All right, now that is not your typical scotch profile. How do they get those flavors in there? Is it just a matter of aging it longer?
Age plays a part, sure, but Glenmorangie takes a more deliberate approach with Signet. They actually roast some of their barley, almost like you would for coffee beans, actually.
Hold on, they roast the barley like over a fire.
Exactly. And that's a big part of where those chocolate and coffee notes come from. You won't find that in a lot of scotches. And it doesn't stop there. They finish Signet in sherry casks. And not just any sherry casks. It's got to be Oloroso sherry casks for that really rich, nutty, almost decadent flavor.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. So, roasted barley for the chocolate, Oloroso sherry casks for those rich toffee notes. It's like they're not just making whiskey, they're composing it, like a symphony of flavor.
I love that analogy. You're spot on, Glenmorangie Signet. It's very much a designed whiskey. They're not just letting time and chance dictate the flavor. Every step of the way, they're making choices from the barley to how much it's roasted to those specific sherry casks for finishing.
So they're controlling the flavor profile from grain to glass. That's fascinating. But does this level of control actually translate to a better whiskey?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly,
And
it depends. I mean, some whiskey drinkers, they love the surprises that come with a more traditional approach.
Yeah.
Let the cask work its magic over decades.
Right, let those barrels do their thing.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But for folks who really appreciate a whiskey that's been crafted with this level of intentionality, Glenmorangie Signet, it's in a league of its own.
So it's not about being better, it's a different philosophy of whiskey making. It's like, I'm imagining someone trying to make a perfect loaf of sourdough bread that's been passed down for generations versus a pastry chef designing a complex dessert with layers of flavor and texture, both amazing, just different approaches.
Nailed it. And you know what's interesting? Glenmorangie doesn't even put an age statement on Signet.
Really?
Nope. They're not trying to impress you with how long it's been aged. They're saying, trust our process. We know what we're doing. This whiskey is ready when it's ready.
That's bold. Most scotch drinkers I know, they're obsessed with those age statements. The older the better, right? This feels like a power move.
It does, doesn't it? It shows a real confidence in their craft. They're not afraid to challenge those conventions, to push the boundaries of what a single malt can be. And that confidence, it comes from generations of expertise, a deep understanding of their craft and a willingness to innovate.
Okay, but going back to that Celtic emblem, that connection to ancient Scotland,
Mhm.
does that translate to the actual taste of the whiskey?
Absolutely. Remember those seemingly simple choices about barley and water.
You mean the fact that they use local barley and water sourced directly from the Tarlogy Springs? I'll admit, when I read that in the notes, I was like, okay, marketing fluff.
It's easy to be skeptical, but trust me, it's more than marketing in this case. The Tarlogy Springs are special. That water filters through layers of limestone, and that gives it this unique mineral content, you see. They use that water, that mineral-rich water, for every step, mashing, fermentation, and those minerals. They're a fundamental part of the whiskey's character.
So the water is like the bedrock, literally, of the flavor.
Exactly. And then you've got the barley. Local barley means Glenmorangie is tapping into the terroir of the Scottish Highlands.
Wait, terroir, like wine. We're talking about terroir with whiskey now.
Oh, yeah. Just like wine, whiskey is a product of the land, the soil, the climate, even the microorganisms in the air. All of that influences the barley, and that in turn influences the final taste of the whiskey.
That's amazing. I'm getting this whole new appreciation for what goes into a glass of Glenmorangie Signet. It's like you're tasting the landscape, the history, the very essence of Scotland.
Precisely. It's more than just a drink. It's a sensory experience, a journey for the palate. And speaking of journeys, I have to share what Glenmorangie's master distiller, Dr. Bill Lumsden, said about Signet. He called it a culmination of centuries of whiskey-making tradition.
Centuries of tradition packed into one bottle. No pressure, Dr. Lumsden. But seriously, what did he mean by that?
Well, Glenmorangie is famous for their stills. They're unusually tall, a holdover from their founding way back in the 1800s. Those stills, they produce a very specific kind of spirit, incredibly elegant, very fruity, almost floral even. That's the base, the foundation, upon which they build the more complex flavors of Signet.
So even their equipment has history. They're blending those time-honored techniques with the modern innovations, the roasted barley, the specific sherry cask finishing.
Exactly. They're not afraid to experiment, to push those boundaries of flavor, but it's all rooted in that deep respect for tradition.
Okay, so we've talked about the history, the production, the philosophy, but let's bring it back down to earth for a second. When you're actually sitting down with a glass of Glenmorangie Signet, how should you be drinking it?
This is not a whiskey I'd be slamming back after a long day. Signet deserves your full attention.
So we're talking about a special occasion dram.
Absolutely. This is a whiskey to sip slowly, to contemplate, to savor the complexity, maybe light a fire, put on some music, really create an experience around it.
And what about pairing it with food? Does it overpower everything, or are there certain flavors that complement it well?
That's a great question, and one that deserves its own deep dive. But if you're looking for a starting point,
All right, so paint me a picture here. I'm curled up by the fire, maybe some jazz is playing in the background. What am I putting on the table to go with this special occasion Signet?
well, if you're feeling classic, you can't go wrong with a rich, dark chocolate dessert.
Ooh, I like where your head's at.
Yeah, the bitterness of the chocolate, it'll play off those sweet toffee notes in the whiskey beautifully. But, you could also go savory.
Oh, see, now you're speaking my language. Signet feels like it has the depth to stand up to some bolder flavors.
You're right, it does. You could try it with a perfectly seared steak, maybe some roasted root vegetables on the side.
You're killing me. Okay, but food aside for a second, when I'm actually taking that first sip of Signet, what should I be paying attention to?
Don't rush it. Let the whiskey rest in the glass for a minute or two first. Let those aromas open up. You'll get those dark fruits, the spices, maybe even a hint of that chocolate and toffee. Then take a small sip. Let it coat your palate. Think about the textures, the mouthfeel. Is it velvety smooth? Or does it have a bit more grip from those sherry casks?
This is what I love about whiskey, all those layers of flavor, the way it evolves as you drink it.
Exactly. And as you continue to sip, pay attention to how the flavors linger on your tongue after you swallow. That's the finish. And with a whiskey like Signet, it can be incredibly complex, really rewarding. You might get those lingering spice notes, maybe a hint of citrus, even a touch of smoke. Every sip is a journey.
It's like they orchestrated the whole experience from the moment you see that bottle to that final lingering taste.
Exactly. And that's what makes Glenmorangie Signet so special.
Yeah.
It's a whiskey that engages all your senses, sparks your curiosity, and it invites you to really appreciate the artistry of whiskey making at its finest.
It's more than just a drink. It's an experience to be savored.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Uh-huh.
And, that willingness to push those boundaries, to challenge our preconceived notions of what whiskey can be, that's what makes Glenmorangie so exciting. They're not content with resting on their laurels. They're constantly innovating, experimenting, searching for that next level of complexity and nuance.
Makes you wonder what they'll come up with next.
Doesn't it? But for now, I'd say let's raise a glass to Glenmorangie Signet, a whiskey that truly embodies both the weight of tradition and the thrill of innovation.
Cheers to that, and cheers to all of you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Glenmorangie Signet. Until next time, happy sipping.